Hello, fellow humans. This is M and V, and this is a channel where we talk about random things that interest us and maybe go too in depth about certain topics. Today, we're going to be talking about purity in the US, specifically purity culture. So, to kind of start this off, this was the topic I had in mind because I went on like a huge binging of God is Grey content, as well as like watching some episodes of the intellectual media and her kind of historic perspective. God is Grey, if you don't know her, she does more of like Christian-centered, like personal perspective on purity culture. But to kind of start things off, I kind of wanted to go into what we consider purity culture to be, as well as how it affects America, right? So for me, I've noticed that historically, because the US has been more religious, we've had this kind of weird relationship with sexual desire, sexual intimacy, etc. V, what do you feel that same way or?
Yeah, we've had conversations before where we've discussed, not on what it's called, not on Skype, where we talked about how it's almost as if America is saying, "Be sexy, be sexual," but no, stop it, don't be sexy. We've
Mm-hmm.
had like these weird discussions about how it should be.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I definitely agree that both sides of the argument are definitely interesting things to say.
Yeah, and I mean, have you seen like God is Grey or the intellectual media?
Unfortunately, I have not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just got my notes this morning, so.
Well, I mean, for God is Grey, she's still a Christian, but her background is that she struggled with her faith a lot because she didn't quite understand the ideals that she's had as a Christian conflicting with what she was being told in the church. So, for example, hating her body for being sexual or not respecting herself for being sexual, that sort of thing. Um, but as far as I think right now, America is really battling with these two ideologies. Like, for example, when we first started this series, we talked about like dating preferences, and the whole conversation around that was like men would suggest that a woman that has gotten around is like not a good partner, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder how much of that is from our purity culture religiously,
Mm-hmm.
or if that's like a foundation for most relationships. I don't think that's the case, but it is a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, it's. I think the reason historically that it's quote unquote bad to have a girl who sleeps around is because back in the day, men had to know who the father of the children were. So who are we? Am I providing for my own children? Am I providing for this other man's child or children or anything like that? So
Mm-hmm.
it has its evolutionary what do you call it background to it, and another thing is it was a little more if it had to be a promiscuous woman versus a promiscuous man. It was better for the man to be promiscuous, hypothetically speaking, because he could impregnate, again hypothetically, he could impregnate more women than the other way around. I hope I'm making sense. I'm kind of like jumping all over the place here, but I'm just thinking like nowadays we're still holding on to those same values, and some of
Mm-hmm.
it is religious, but some of it is also um, what's it called from the starts with the letter E.
E?
Evolution. There we go.
Evolution.
Yeah. So some of it is definitely religious, and then some of it is evolutionary. So we're still carrying over some of the same habits
Mm,
as our forefathers and mothers.
yeah, I mean, I guess if we're talking about evolution, are we talking about like cultural evolution?
Mm, I would say cultural evolution sounds about
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, and I mean this battle seems like this battle for like purity versus like sex liberation, I feel like has been going on for many, many years, right? Like even before the sexual revolution sexual revolution in the 70s, intellectual media, she was talking about how even before that there was this kind of um, loosening of purity, if you will, or this like turning more casualness of sex. And I think this she also connected this to the point where media had realized that sex sells and then started promoting more sexual advertisements. I may be quoting her wrong, but that was from what I was getting from one of her videos. Um, and so I wonder almost like, do you think that our focus via advertisements and via media has anything to do with our conflict on purity versus sexual liberation?
Well, I would like to inaccurately quote Osho and say that you said if you have a tree and you put clothes on it and you never allow that tree to take its clothes off, you'll be dying for photos of naked trees.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's very similar for the purity stance. If you keep telling the country to be pure, have these pure intentions and pure desires, but then you throw on a sexy advertisement, like you're really gonna want to have that burger with that girl in the Daisy Dukes, and who happens to be washing the car in a white shirt.
Yeah, the hamburger sauce dripping all over her bosom.
Yeah, exactly. They're really, really gonna want to have that hamburger, and
Mm.
you come to watch some of these TV shows that have a lot of sex in them, you're really, really gonna want to keep watching that show. And I think it's a marketing ploy personally, um, because sex does sell. But then you think about, and it's a slight tangent here, but you
Mhm.
think about people who live in nudist colonies. They, to my knowledge, I'm not saying every nudist colony is the same, but to my knowledge, they don't have issues with sexuality and things like. Now they are sexual beings; they have sex on their minds, of course, but I don't think it's to the same extent as those of us who are clothed, because we're always taught to not look at our bodies. But you get some moms, and I applaud these moms personally. You hear about some moms who walk around their young children naked to show their children, hey, it's a naked body. It's nothing to be, glamorized over. I mean, sure, you can appreciate it and you can enjoy it, but it's just a body.
Mhm.
So as far as purity goes with the media and the ads, again, I just think it's a marketing ploy that is done well by a country who has told the people to be pure.
Yeah, and I could see that. But I almost wonder if it's like a chicken and the egg situation. Like, what led to what? Or does it even matter? Or do they just like compound each other? Wait, does that make sense? Do they like make each other worse?
Mm. Uh, I don't know if I'd say they make each other worse. I don't know if I'd say they make each other better either, though. Um, Sex is very natural. Sex is the reason we're all here. Even in petri dishes, there's still a sexual component of the sex of the male plus the female. Like we are just it's innate within us. We can't help it.
Mm.
Um, to try to turn that off, I think is where we get in trouble. So there's this movie called Dangerous Beauty, if I remember correctly. I think I might have told you about it in passing. And basically it talks about the time in Venice back before the Catholic Revolution. So this is the time in Venice where what we call them prostitutes now, but prostitutes didn't have the same uh, connotation as they do in today's culture. They were celebrated. They were used as ambassadors and just different concubines to different men of power, and their wits and their smarts were very well established. Unlike the pure, quote unquote, pure women, I say that quote unquote because you can't see me do it with my fingers. Anyways, yeah. So this woman literally saved her country with a foreign king simply by being a prostitute. Um, but once the I want to say they're Catholic. Once the Catholic invasion came in and took over the city of Venice, they called these prostitutes witches, and they said they're these evil beings that were um, guilty of certain sinful pleasures and all that stuff. And I won't give away too much about the movie, in case anybody wants to see it. But that's kind of how we are sexually in a historical sense. So I think we're always going to be going back and forth between these loops of sex is good versus sex is bad. I feel like that's our destiny because you get bored after a while, to be quite honest. I think we get bored as a culture. We're like, oh, it's too sexually this, let's make it impure to be sexually liberated. Oh, now we're all hippy dippy stuff and we're all good with God. Let us go back to our times of sexual liberation. I think we're born to go back and forth.
But see, I guess I would push back on that a little bit, because I would think being bored of the topic would be the ideal, wouldn't it? I think too much, like, there's been too much of an extreme swing. You had told me something once before that kind of stuck with me, and that society is like a pendulum. If you pull the string too far to one side, it's going to swing back and cause an opposite reaction to go the other way. I feel like because the US has had such a strong purity culture, there's like this other swing that, some parts of society have done where they're way more sexual liberal to the point where it seems almost detrimental.
Mm-hmm.
Both for example, people will try to be polygamists without realizing that they're actually not suited for that lifestyle and just, wreak havoc on their emotions. You know what I mean? Like, I would rather people get bored of the topic and it become just kind of this neutral thing that we know happens and we have kind of a general understanding of it, but to not be so passionate of. I would almost think that would be ideal.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that would be ideal because you don't want too much. That sounds bad. Actually, I take that back. I think I want a little tug of war, a little push and pull here and there. I think it's fun if you can almost play it like a role, like the demure chastity young maiden. Then you have your very vile and sexual, ready to go cowboy.
Well, I mean, we'd have to separate personal sexual adventures versus society's ideas of sexuality. I agree with you. Individually, people can be excited and as passionate about their sex as possible, but on a society level, I hope they're bored of it.
Yeah, no, I'm with the moms that walk around the house naked. That's how I want it to be. I want my kids to know that there's nothing wrong with your body. Mm-hmm. So they can kind of get a FU to society. When society tries to pull those strings, mm-hmm. It really won't be much there to pull. So.
Yeah, and I mean, how can I say? I feel that we do a disservice when we make something scarier than it is. Because ultimately, the idea with purity culture, even though I think it comes from a good place and that they don't want people's feelings to get hurt, they don't want people to be put in a bad spot, like getting pregnant too soon. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the sheltering of children to the point where they can't take care of themselves. But they're more likely to make mistakes because you never let them make mistakes when they were younger.
Mm.
Not saying that when they're young, they should get pregnant sooner, but like, but you know what I mean? Like, if they get the idea that sex isn't this end-all be-all of a relationship, maybe they're less likely to take the leap with random people to have sex to prove their interest in each other. Or they're more likely to understand that, hey, you know, this stuff happens if you have sex. Probably not worth it. You know?
Yeah. You sent me a video from Underground, or the Middle Ground, excuse me. And it had the virgins versus the sex workers.
Yeah.
So that's what this reminds me of.
Mm.
The whole time I was watching it, I was conflicted because I was like, man, I don't know whose side to be on. I like both sides. Like playing ping pong with, not ping pong, what is it? Pinball. I was like, here, yeah, ding, 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 all over the place.
Yeah, and I think it's like, again, going to like those two extremes of like different sides. There is more appeal to a middle ground. But something I kind of wanted to touch on is that there's like this argument that teenagers will have sex no matter what.
Yeah.
I kind of want to get your take on that because from my personal experience, I didn't have sex that much. Like, not at all. What am I saying? I was a late bloomer, if you will. So for me, it was a little strange for people to say that teenagers are going to have sex no matter what, because it felt like a cop-out of people's individual free will. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I don't think that it's true that teens will have sex no matter what. Not only because of personal experience, but because it just makes no sense. Like there are some people who are going to want to have sex, and they're going to have sex. You're not going to stop them. That happens. Just in the same vein, there's going to be people who don't want to have sex that young, and you're not going to start them on that journey. Because that's kind of weird and that's very unfair. Although I do remember, I don't know where this came from, but someone was saying that their father, it was a boy, was willing to hire a prostitute. But I don't know if that was a friend amongst ours in the international group.
Yeah, I think it was the international community because I feel like that was a big thing for a couple international guys.
Yeah.
Where I was taken aback. I was like, wait, what? Wait,
Yeah.
eh?
Exactly. So I mean, unless you're in that situation, it's kind of hard to force people to have sex. So. Yeah.
But I guess what I mean by that also is and this kind of loops back to the media part, is there this expectation that we should be having sex? Therefore, teenagers are more likely to feel like they have to have sex. You know what I mean? Because there was kind of a culture when I was younger where, like, if you hadn't had sex yet, you were kind of deemed weird or like something was wrong with you.
Well, the way I understood it growing up, and this is just me being in my own bubble,
Yeah.
it was weird to ask if you had sex. I had this little girl, and I mean little girl, like not like baby little girl. I had this young girl, and she was younger than I was. Visibly, you could tell like she should still be, I don't know, playing with Bratz dolls or something. She was like, "Have you had sex yet?" And then I never answered her because I just thought that was a rude question to even ask. So I never grew up with the culture of kids having to have sex. We knew it was happening, but it wasn't anybody's business. For example, in Colorado, I think that's probably the most sexually active place I lived in out of all places I've stayed. But my age at the same time was a little different.
Mm-hmm.
But we knew it was happening, but we just weren't talking about it. And sometimes with boys, sometimes with girls. Like it was a very open community.
Mm-hmm.
I never felt pressured though. Um, when I moved up here, I felt like everybody was virgins because they all seemed like it. I know that's weird to say, but they all had a virgin vibe to them.
See, I think you just mistake our quirkiness for rigidity.
Oh my goodness.
Nah,
Not
I,
not that you can't be sexy, but
yeah. I mean, there was definitely like sexual stuff going on, and it was clearly talked about amongst people. Like I remember I would have friends that would tell me stories of like joking around saying they were texting somebody while they were having sex and the guy getting angry. I was mortified for the guy.
oh my goodness.
You know?
Yeah.
So it was definitely there and it felt like it was something that was like it was supposed to happen at this time, you know what I mean? So I wonder if it had to do with the expectation or that people or teenagers specifically actually wanted to. But we're kind of getting to that mark. So do we have any closing thoughts on the topic?
Um, I like your question. Who do you think will win the sex culture battle?
Oh yeah. So I personally think that it seems like society is gearing towards more sexual liberation.
I
Because
agree.
I think so many people aren't that religious or have that much um, stake in religion
Mm-hmm.
that I think because of it being more mainstream sex liberation, I think that will win the battle.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
I agree.
Finished.
Continue.
I thought you were going to explain, and then you're just like, yes.
Yeah, drop the mic.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening in. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this topic. If you have anything that you thought we were wrong about or that you want to talk more about, please comment down below. And see you next time. Bye.
Okay.